Order, order. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Business Trade. Abtisam Mohamed.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 1, 3 and 11 together. Revitalising our high streets is a priority for this government, and I and the Secretary of State have spoken to colleagues across Whitehall to ensure we are working together to create better conditions over the long term for high street businesses to thrive. That means addressing antisocial behaviour and crime, rolling out banking hubs, stamping out late payments, empowering communities to make the most of vacant properties, strengthening the post office network, reforming the apprenticeship levy, and, as the Chancellor confirmed yesterday, reforming business rates too.
Abtisam Mohamed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are just short of 5,500 businesses in Sheffield Central. More than 80% of these are micro businesses employing under 10 employees. These are the engines of local economic growth in our area, and they provide vital services in our community. Many businesses in my constituency welcome yesterday's announcement of permanently lower business rates for the hospitality, retail and leisure properties from 26 to 27. Can the Minister outline what further steps he is taking with the Chancellor to create a fairer business rate system so we can ensure our high streets thrive more permanently? Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her question. I think it's the first time I've had the chance to congratulate her on her election to this House. She's absolutely right when she says that if we're to see our high streets to thrive, we need to ensure that there is a genuinely level playing field for businesses online and businesses in the high street. As the Chancellor announced yesterday, to deliver that pledge from 26-27, we intend to introduce permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties. To fund that, we intend to introduce a large business multiplier from 26-27, which will apply a higher rate on the most valuable properties, which will capture the majority of large distribution warehouses, including those used by online giants. But we want to go further, Mr. Speaker, so the Chancellor published a discussion paper yesterday inviting businesses for further ideas on reform of business rates.
Sojan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small and independent shops are the lifeblood of our high streets and make the communities in my Ashford constituency special. Far too many high street businesses have been feeling the squeeze over recent years, which has led to empty units being an all too familiar sight. I welcome the measures that were announced in yesterday's budget, particularly around reform of business rate. Will my honourable friend update the House on what the government is doing to empower local communities to acquire empty units?
I congratulate my honourable friend on his election to this House. Colleagues across Whitehall are bringing forward plans to introduce high street rental auctions, which will bring back vacant units back into use, should make town centres more accessible and affordable for tenants. We're also going to take steps to crack down on antisocial behaviour. We've seen a huge increase in antisocial behaviour and crime in our high streets under the party opposite, and we're determined to take steps to crack down on that issue.
Pinto-Duschinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable friend for his previous answers. We are blessed with some fantastic high streets in Hendon, like Mill Hill Broadway, Station Road in the High Street in Edgware, Watling Avenue in Burnt Oak, Brent Street in Hendon and Vivian Avenue in West Hendon. But when I talk to business owners, they all too often tell me they are struggling to find and retain the staff they need to grow successfully. What steps is the department taking to make sure small businesses can get the skilled staff they need, not just to survive, but to thrive?
Well, I welcome my honourable friend's question. I know the high streets that he's talking about in his constituency, as they're very close to Britain's greatest constituency. He will be aware that we have already taken steps to help businesses recruit more skilled staff. It's one of the reasons why we have established Skills England. Also one of the reasons why we've taken steps to reform the apprenticeship levy, and why also earlier this week the Prime Minister brought forward plans to help people get back to work.
Mims Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Anti-Growth Coalition, led in Mid-Sussex District Council by the Lib Dems, Labour, Independent and Greens, are bringing in Sunday, bank holiday and evening town centre parking charges. Wow. With the, on top of a 30% rise, including the sword of Damocles of maybe village car parking charges, could the Minister reiterate and perhaps meet with councils who are determined to derail his mission on growth that these kinds of draconian measures on our high streets are going to do exactly the opposite of what he and his apparent budget is looking to achieve?
Yeah. Well, I gently suggest to the honourable lady that the anti-growth coalition are sat on that side of the House. I will gently point out to her that the highest number of businesses to go bust for 30 years was under the party opposite last year. I would happily ask her to use her influence with the Conservative-led council in my constituency that are bringing parking charges in, which will certainly damage the nighttime economy.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, and when it comes to high street businesses, I welcome some of the things that the Minister has referred to, and thank you for that. But in many, many other things, for instance, in the town of Newtownards, where family businesses make up a great many of the attractive high street businesses, for instance, Warden's Nuts, the family butchers, all those are very important, as they are in Ballinhinch as well. Has the Minister ever had any opportunity to talk to the Chamber of Trades? The Chamber of Trade in Newtownards is working very well. There are other Chamber of Trades within my constituency that contribute and can contribute. Has there been an opportunity to speak to them to get their ideas for ways forward? Thank you so much.
Well, I welcome the honourable gentleman. I know he is an assiduous champion for his constituency in this House. And if he wants to bring his Chamber of Commerce to meet with me to discuss the issues in his constituency in more detail, I'll very happily make the time to meet him and them.
Can I just say, we're 10 minutes gone, we're still on question one, we need to speed up a little bit. And also, if you could look at me, will be helpful. We're going through the third person. I know Mr Shannon's popular, but even so, he should go through me. Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In my constituency of Wokingham, the number of people shopping on our high streets has not returned to pre-COVID level, and we have lost anchor stores like Marks & Spencer's and several banks. The government urgently need to save our high streets, but reducing RHL relief from 75% to 40% will come as bad news to thousands of businesses. When will the government deliver a fundamental reform of business rates to save our high streets and end the penalising of productive investment?
Mr Speaker, I'm grateful for your guidance, and whilst the honourable member opposite is popular, you are much more important. In answer to the honourable gentleman's question, I just gently point out to him that we have started the process of reforming business rates. We are introducing permanently lower rates for retail, hospitality and leisure from 26-27. We have listened to businesses and kept business rates relief, and we are opening up the opportunities for businesses to come forward with ideas for future reform of business rates going forward.
Elaborate.
Number two, sir.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government is committed to strengthening the collective voices of workers and restoring the principle that work should always pay. That is why we introduced the Employment Rights Bill, which will restore the school support staff negotiating body and introduce a framework for a fair pay agreement in adult social care. This, combined with other measures in the bill, will empower workers, unions and employers to come together to negotiate fair pay terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thanks for that answer. It was absolutely fantastic, a great achievement of the Labour government to bring in the Employment Rights Bill within the first 100 days of the Labour government. Absolutely brilliant achievement. But does the Minister not agree with me that experts say that sectoral bargaining is a tool to be reckoned with for both employees and employers? So can he explain to the House what plans the government might have to extend sectoral collective bargaining in other sectors of the economy?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right that there is plenty of evidence worldwide that collective bargaining does improve terms and conditions and the overall vitality of the economy, but we have to start somewhere. with this, and with about 5% of the entire working population employed in adult social care, and with a 25% turnover rate, rampant abuse of zero-hours contracts and the minimum wage laws, we felt that adult social care was the sector that needed the most attention first. It's absolutely an area where we need to make a concerted effort to drive up working conditions. Those that work in this area have been undervalued and underappreciated for far too long, and that has to change. So we're going to focus on getting it right in adult social care, and then we will see where that takes us from there.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Undoubtedly, the legislation from the other side is empowering unions. We've seen that this week when the Secretary of State for Scotland was unable to meet with the CBI Scotland, a very important body, because he couldn't enter his own building because of a picket line. We've read in the papers this morning that ASLEV, the rail union, insists on using fax machines and won't allow their members to use email. How is that helping collective bargaining?
Well, I have to educate the honourable member on what trade unions do, actually. ASLEF are not a trade union in the adult social care sector, which is what we're talking about here. We want to work on a tripartite basis, business and workers together with the government, getting terms and conditions right. And with the lowest increase in living standards on record under his government, I would think that he would want to support that as well.
Right. Let us come to Gareth Bacon, the Shadow Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government's own impact assessment for the adult social care sector confirmed that collective bargaining will be very costly for business. If pay awards match those of junior doctors, the cost of the increased wage bill will be £5.8 billion, driving up business rates, reducing employment or hours, and imposing further costs on business. So can the Minister therefore confirm when further collective bargaining will be rolled out, to which sectors, and by how much those businesses can expect to be clobbered?
Well, I think if the Shadow Minister is complaining about the state of the adult social care sector, he should really be looking at his own party as to how it's been left to rot for 14 years. I'd point out that the impact assessment says that the overall cost to employers is going to be 0.4% overall. And I think, as the economic analysis says, the Make Work pay package will help to raise living standards across the country and create opportunities for all. I think 0.4% is a fantastic achievement to get that kind of deal. And if he doesn't want to support increased working conditions for people, he doesn't want to see an end to fire and rehire, if he doesn't want to see an end to better maternity protections, then he should continue to vote against this bill. I don't think his constituents will thank him for that.
Gareth Bacon. It was two. Right, well, Joe Morris.
On the floor, Mr. Speaker.
We have made, Mr. Speaker, significant progress on developing a new industrial strategy, and I'm delighted to report to the House that we published a green paper on the 14th of October setting out our plans for a modern industrial strategy. We have set our sights higher than the previous government. We have thrown off their ideological shackles. We have worked in partnership with business and our colleagues across the nations and regions to set us on a path to a credible 10-year plan delivering certainty, drive and ambition businesses need to invest in the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For 14 years, businesses in rural communities, like in my constituency, were ignored and neglected by the Conservatives in government. Can the Minister elaborate on how the industrial strategy will allow rural communities to share in the proceeds of growth?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. The difference, I think, between a Labour government and a Conservative government is that we believe that growth needs to be felt in our communities, not just measured on a spreadsheet. I know that my honourable friend is working really hard in his constituency already and is already campaigning on issues like banking services, which are so important for our rural communities, and he's right. The industrial strategy needs to be designed and implemented in lockstep with our local leaders, mayors and devolved leaders across the country, alongside our wider plans for housing and skills, which of course will be part of the picture, and I look forward to working with my honourable friend on identifying the barriers to growth in rural communities so that we can break them down.
Alistair Carmichael.
Speaker, the development of marine renewable energy is getting very close to commercial deployment. If we're able to get it across the line, then it will bring with it a supply chain that we would be able to have built and held in this country, then looking towards exports across the world. That would surely be a great result for any industrial strategy. What is the government doing to ensure that industrial strategy helps marine renewables get to full commercial deployment?
I think the honourable gentleman makes a really good point, and I'd be really happy to have a proper conversation with him about this. This marine renewable is a huge opportunity for us. We can build the supply chains across our country, and of course Scotland is uniquely placed to take advantage of that, and I'd love to have a conversation with him about it.
The Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to an industrial strategy, in their first few months, the Labour government have effectively shut down UK virgin steel making capacity with no commitments to primary steel in yesterday's budget of broken promises. Unlike the United States and the European Union, they have failed to protect our car manufacturers against Chinese state aid. Then they massively increased the cost to the very drivers of industry, real businesses, of employing people. Should they not be calling it their deindustrialisation strategy?
The challenge we have, Mr. Speaker, is that we have inherited the worst Parliament for living standards in modern history. We have inherited huge challenges that we have to overcome, but we are looking to the long term with our industrial strategy.
I don't need any more. Do we understand each other?
I'm not sure if the honourable gentleman has been paying attention, but we are developing a steel strategy, which the previous government failed to do, which will be funded with £2.5 billion of funding. We have put a boost of £2 billion into our car industry only yesterday in the budget, alongside £1 billion for automotive and money for life sciences. We are developing an industrial strategy for the long term for the first time, and we are not following the party opposite, which just let our industries suffer to get to crisis point that we are now having to deal with.
Greg Smith.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister mentions the car industry, so yesterday, after the budget of broken promises, talking about the industrial strategy, the SMMT's Mike Hawes said, delivering that strategy depends on the UK being globally competitive. Additional national insurance contributions will put massive pressure on the automotive supply chain, which is predominantly SMEs. He describes the lack of substantive measures to support the new car market as hugely disappointing, concluding the cost will soon be felt in reduced UK investment, economic growth and jobs. So with such dire warnings so early on, isn't this more evidence that Labour just doesn't get business and their industrial strategy is in tatters before it's even begun?
For a government that doesn't get business, it's surprising, isn't it, that we got £63 billion of investment through the International Investment Summit, twice what the previous government managed to do after 2 years of planning it. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, are working very closely with the automotive industry. We know the global situation is very difficult, and I talk to Mike Hawes very often, and which is why we've put £2 billion of funding into the budget yesterday. It's why we're working very closely with them to create the conditions that we need to transition to electric vehicles and to protect our industry in a way that, frankly, the previous government failed to do.
James Arthur.
Number 5, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Office of Product Safety and Standards within my department has been working across government and industry to protect consumers and understand the causes of any safety issues. This has included giving consumers clear information, enabling them to purchase, use and change product safety, assessing the compliance of manufacturers, importers and ensuring products are safe when they are placed on the market. They're also involving a programme of work to address the sale of non-compliant products available through online marketplaces, including e-bikes and the batteries. And last week, I visited the Office of Product Safety and Standards, Teddington Laboratories, where we launched the department's new Buy Safe, Be Safe consumer campaign.
James Aston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer. 2 weeks ago, there was a fire in a 10th floor flat in Plaistow in my constituency. Thankfully, due to this quick reaction of the residents and the neighbours and the good work of the London Fire Brigade, they were all able to be evacuated quickly and there were no serious injuries. Clearly, Mr Speaker, this could have been worse. Does the Minister agree this is a perfect example of why we need to continue to make work to make these batteries safer and also run awareness campaigns so that residents understand the safety issues, how they can mitigate against them and where they need to get rid of them, how they can dispose of them safely?
Thank my honourable friend for his question. He's absolutely right. Manufacturers must already ensure that products are safe and provide instructions for safe use, including safe charging. But as we hear, there are unfortunately far too many fires, and I pay tribute to the London Fire Brigade for the work they are doing on this issue as well. That is why we launched our awareness campaign last week, and we're also seeking from the Product Safety Regulation and Meteorology Bill to get powers to keep up with technological developments and ensure that e-bikes can be sold safely to consumers in the UK.
Mohamed.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 6, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As the Chancellor announced yesterday, the national living wage will now rise to £12.21 an hour, meaning a full-time worker can be earning an extra £1,400 a year. We've also announced the stopping of the use of minimum service levels and tackled safe late payments for the self-employed. And of course, we have now introduced the Employment Rights Bill, which will raise living standards across the country and provide better support for businesses engaged in good practice. It also makes good on our promise to the British people that we will now make work pay.
Mohamed.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. In my constituency of Watford, there are many people who are employed in the hospitality, retail and construction sectors. And with a big hospital, there are many people employed in the health and social care sector as well. Can the Minister please confirm that the government's Make Work Pay plan will bring long-lasting benefits to these and other workers?
Absolutely, Mr Speaker. We are determined to make sure that those sectors, particularly some of the ones that he's mentioned where low pay and insecurity are rife, will benefit. We're working closely with businesses and employers across the spectrum to ensure that we get the proposals right, because for too long insecurity and low pay has been rife in the UK economy, and that has to change.
Shadow Minister Jerome Mayu.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. After receiving millions from the trade union paymasters for their election, Labour's rewarding them with a package of 1970s French-style workplace regulations that will increase the cost of doing business in the UK to the tune of £5 billion a year, and that cost disproportionately falling on SMEs. And that's before the £25 billion body blow to business delivered by the Chancellor yesterday in her anti-business budget of broken promises.
Absolutely.
Does the Minister agree with the Office of Budget Responsibility that this government's decisions will make workers poorer, not richer, as increased employment taxes are passed on in lower wages, and that business investment will fall, not rise, as a direct result of this government?
Well, I have to say, Mr Speaker, I find it incredible that the opposition are quoting French-style labour laws when they introduced the minimum services legislation. They always held up France as the example of where that works already. I wish they'd make their mind up. And I think the implication behind the question about trade union funding says rather more about their attitude to how legislation is made in this country than ours. We do things on this side of the House because we believe them. And actually, if he looks carefully at what the OBR is saying, £1,400 into people's pockets as a result of the national living wage increases is a fantastic achievement, and we should all be very proud of that.
Johnny Vaughan.
Question number 7, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I'll answer questions 7 and 10 together. Our plan for small business will help businesses scale up and increase productivity and growth. We're doing this by creating opportunities for businesses to compete and access the finance they need to scale, export and break into new markets. Furthermore, at the budget yesterday, we announced that we will bring forward a small business command paper next year, setting out more detail on how we'll support small businesses.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the Minister's answer, but one of the ways we can support small businesses to scale up is through infrastructure investment, so businesses can get their goods to market more quickly. So would the Department support my campaign to shift more freight from trucks to trains, but starting with the Channel Tunnel, where only 10% of its freight capacity is actually being used at present in my constituency?
Well, I take this opportunity to congratulate my honourable friend on his election to this House. I remember well, as I'm sure he does, the problems the people and businesses of Kent had to endure when the M20 became a lorry park, thanks to the combination of poor planning by the last government and the poor quality trade deal they negotiated with Brussels. We certainly support the expansion of rail freight, not least as it helps to build the resilience of supply chains. And I'd be very happy to meet with him or facilitate a meeting for him with ministers in the Department for Transport to listen more about his campaign.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small businesses like the Greek Corner in Shipley have benefited from Bradford Council's business growth programme, funded by the Towns Fund, providing capital assistance for businesses to create new jobs. The measures of support announced in the Chancellor's budget yesterday for local authorities and small businesses will be vital to revitalising our high streets. Does the Minister agree with me that local authorities working with local communities are best placed to direct investment to help SMEs grow? Thank you.
I take this opportunity too, Mr. Speaker, to congratulate my honourable friend on her election. And I certainly agree with her that local authorities working with local communities are fundamental to supporting SMEs in local economies. It's one of the reasons why, as well as backing local authorities in the budget yesterday, we're also backing Tracy Brabin, the excellent Mayor of West Yorkshire, with the funding to support the priorities of local communities in constituencies such as hers. It's also why we're introducing measures such as high street rental auctions and a powerful community right to buy, so that local communities can start the process of reviving their high streets themselves.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw attention to my entry in the register. The Minister mentioned access to finance being vital for small business, but I hope he knows that the last few days have seen chaos in the motor finance market, with a number of major lenders suspending lending entirely in response to a judgment in the appeal court. This has obviously caused consternation across the entire business lending sector, and I wonder if the Minister could reassure us that government is fully engaged with the industry and the Financial Conduct Authority in sorting out an issue that could have a very, very significant impact on the entire sector and its supply chain.
We are certainly looking at the issues that judgment has caused and that have arisen in the industry. More generally on access to finance, I'm sure he would welcome that at the investment summit, which has already been referenced by my right honourable friend, we launched the British Growth Partnership, which is aimed in particular at unlocking investment in businesses wanting to scale up.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Economic growth happens when micro-sized businesses become small businesses. We learned yesterday that micro-businesses which employ up to 4 full-time workers on the national living wage will be exempt from employers' national insurance. Yet small businesses that employ 5 workers or more will be subject to employers' national insurance. How is this measure going to help small businesses in the South West to scale up and bring economic growth to the region?
Well, I'm glad, I think, that the honourable gentleman welcomes the measures that we took in the budget to raise employment allowance to help the very smallest firms. The Federation of Small Business said yesterday that it will be a very big help for small firms. On his wider point about the budget, I just gently say to the honourable gentleman, as I'm sure he knows only too well, the economic inheritance that this government faces has led us to have to make some very tough decisions going forward. And if he doesn't support the measures that we've set out in the budget, he needs to say how we're going to finance the extra investment in the NHS, the extra investment in industry that we've set out.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wokingham has one of the highest rates of business survival when compared to the South East and Berkshire averages. But with yesterday's announcement that the government will raise employers' national insurance, that could be thrown into doubt. The high key is plain and simple, a tax on jobs that will deal a hammer blow to our small businesses.
Quite right.
What is the government going to do to mitigate the impact on small businesses in my constituency and across the country?
Say very gently to the honourable gentleman, if he and his party are determined to oppose the measures we took in the budget, including on employers' national insurance contributions, then they need to set out how they're going to fund the extra investment in the NHS, how they're going to fund the investment in the automotive sector and the aerospace sector, how they're going to fund the measures that we've taken to protect and raise living standards going forward.
Bill Esterson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 8.
Mr. Speaker, we held an international investment summit, as we've said, on the 14th of October, 100 days after we formed the new government, and we secured £63 billion of investment. This is twice the level of the previous government's investment summit. This investment will create high-quality, high-skilled, well-paid jobs across the country and represents a huge vote of confidence in this new government.
Sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as my honourable friend quite rightly said, this party is now the party of business without any question. Does she agree with me that the measures that were committed to in yesterday's budget on clean energy, on carbon capture and storage and hydrogen, which were backed up, by the way, by a commitment from a Canadian investor of another $1.8 billion in offshore wind, just show how much this government is in tune with the business community? We're attracting the investment, we're building on that investment summit, and we will deliver jobs for our constituents and for our communities up and down the country.
I agree wholeheartedly with my honourable friend, and I also agree with the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, who said yesterday, and I quote, "Conservatives like myself should be honest. Reeves is clearing up our mess."
Paul Kohler.
Question 9, sir. We recognise the important role the nighttime economy businesses play in supporting local economies and communities. Healthy nighttime economy businesses not only support our creative industries, including musicians, DJs and performance artists, but also support tourism and bolster day economy businesses too. We're focused on our 5-point plan to breathe life back into Britain's high streets. That work will ensure that our high streets are great places for our businesses, supporting economic growth across the UK, including in the nighttime economy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. I refer the House to my entry in the Register of Interests. The hospitality industry is, of course, a crucial aspect of the nighttime economy and is already facing existential crisis with post-Brexit labour shortages, COVID debt and wage, commodity inflation. So what I ask the Minister is, what advice would he give to the hospitality industry and businesses now facing a hike in NI costs and, despite the headlines, are more than doubling in last year's business rates?
Yeah, absolutely right.
I would gently point businesses in the nighttime economy to a series of measures that we took in yesterday's budget, including measures that will reform business rates for the long term from 2026-27. We listened to businesses, including in the nighttime economy, by not abolishing the business rates relief, and in particular, the measures that we've taken there will help, for example, the average pub with a rateable value of almost £17,000. We save over £3,300 next year.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Saturday, I had the opportunity to go out into York on Saturday night with the police. It was incredibly interesting. I'm so grateful for the work that they do. However, it also gave me an opportunity to speak to employers, and certainly we know that the employers in our traditional pubs are really struggling because the pub code just isn't working properly. Therefore, will the Minister meet with myself and the Campaign for Pubs to discuss how we can really improve things for their businesses?
I would be very happy, Mr. Speaker, to meet with my honourable friend as she has asked. I know from talking to pubs myself that they're also very worried about the rise in antisocial behaviour and crime in our high streets and town centres. And she and the pubs and other members of the nighttime economy that she works with will, I hope, be reassured by some of the measures that we've taken in the budget to begin the process of cracking down on antisocial behaviour.
Sam Rushworth.
Number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure my honourable friend that the United Kingdom is committed to advancing both free and fair trade around the world that is inclusive, sustainable and seeks to reduce poverty. The UK's Aid for Trade programmes, including the new Trade Centre of Expertise, announced by the Prime Minister just on the 24th of October, builds the capacity of producers, businesses and governments in developing countries to participate in and prosper from global trade. I can assure my honourable friend the UK is committed to making the world a safe and more prosperous place through strengthening our international development work as set out in our recent manifesto.
Sam Rushwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children from Timothy Hackworth Primary School in Shildon wrote to me asking me to raise fair trade with the Minister as part of their Fair Trade Week, including Ashton, who reminded me of the privilege that we have to serve in this place. They'd also like to know, has the Minister met with representatives of the Fair Trade Foundation since his appointment, and does he consider Britain's leadership on fair trade policies can make a meaningful contribution to reducing poverty in sub-Saharan Africa?
Mr. Speaker, firstly let me commend my honourable friend for his work with the local primary school. I know how assiduous he is in advancing the interests of his own constituents, and similarly I can assure him that we fully understand the importance of fair trade. Just in recent weeks I myself have met with a representative of the Fair Trade Foundation, and actually I would pay particular tribute to the work that fair trade is doing with the co-op. Thousands of farmers producing goods such as tea, coffee and sugar, and indeed flowers, are helped by co-ops in our high streets across the country. They are now, of course, the UK's largest seller of fair trade products, and they deserve our commendation as well.
John Grady.
Question number 13, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the International Investment Summit, about which we just heard, secured more than £63 billion worth, including two significant projects for Scotland. Scottish Power, owned by Iberdrola, committed £24 billion to upgrade the UK's energy infrastructure over the next 5 years. Floating offshore wind developer Greenvolt has also selected Aberdeen as its HQ and planned to invest £2.5 billion. That, of course, comes on top of the establishment by this government of GB Energy.
James Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his answer. Yesterday saw the largest budget settlement for the Scottish Government in devolution's history. The Labour Party's absolute commitment to Scotland runs through this government. Last week, the highly respected Strathclyde University Fraser of Allender Institute reported that only 9% of Scottish businesses agree that the Scottish Government understands the business environment in Scotland. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that government understanding of business is crucial in driving investment and growth into Scotland, and that it is critical that the Scottish Government improves its understanding of the business environment?
Mr. Speaker, businesses in Scotland have frankly been let down by two failed governments. We've had a decade of division and decay in Scotland, and I'm glad to see that we now have political stability, with Labour having a majority in Scotland, in Wales and in England. At the same time, we have a commitment to genuine partnership, working with the Scottish Government. I know my honourable friend has particular expertise in relation to energy policy, given his past professional work. I'll be in Torness just tomorrow in my own constituency, meeting with EDF Energy. Just one example of a business that is being held back, frankly, by the policy and approach of the present Scottish Government.
Chris Law.
So, Deputy Speaker, I'm not surprised in the slightest to hear the disparaging comments from the opposite benches in terms of Scotland's future in business, so I think I'll bring it up to speed. Mr. Speaker, for the ninth consecutive year, Scotland, under the SNP Scottish Government, is the top performing area of the UK outside of London for foreign direct investment. Yet Brexit has reduced the attractiveness of the UK as a base for exporting to EU markets, resulting in it being overtaken by France as a leading destination for foreign direct investment in Europe. So does the Minister recognise that reversing what seems to be married to at the moment, the Tories' hard Brexit, is the most significant step this government could take to increase inward investment and boost growth in Scotland?
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, let me deal with both of the failed governments that have been letting Scotland down in the last decade. Firstly, if the honourable gentleman wants to advance the case that it has been a decade of prosperity in Scotland, frankly, good luck to him. The reality is it is very hard to think of a single aspect of Scottish public life that has improved over the last 10 years. Take the case of ferries, take the case of hospitals, take the case of our schools, or indeed the broader business environment. I recognise in relation to Brexit that there's a need for a fundamental reset with the European Union. In recent days I've been taking forward that work. I welcome the work the Prime Minister has been undertaking, but that is the task of a Labour government. As so often on so many issues, the SNP talk and Labour delivers.
Bell Ribeiro Addy, we come to topicals.
Topical question 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, in little more than 100 days in government, this department and its Secretary of State, who is flying to Doha today, have set about delivering on our promises made in our manifesto. We've turned up the dial on growth, publishing our green paper on the modern industrial strategy, which will channel support to key sectors, work across our nations and regions with the private sector and deliver the conditions for investment and good jobs. We've delivered a huge vote of confidence in the UK, securing £63 billion of investment at our International Investment Summit, boosted by investment ploughing into our aerospace, automotive and life science sectors announced in yesterday's budget. And we've kept our promises by publishing the Employment Rights Bill, which represents the biggest upgrade in workers' rights in a generation. We are pro-innovation, pro-worker, pro-wealth creation government, investing all our time in growing the economy for the long term and turning around 14 years of failure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A 4-day week with no loss of pay has proven to have benefits for employers and employees alike, and a recent report by the Autonomy Institute and ALDA suggests it can have a hugely positive impact on the economy. It concludes that Iceland's economy has outperformed most of Europe since adopting a shorter working week and now has one of the lowest unemployment rates. With even more UK businesses beginning a 4-day week trial on Monday as part of the 4-day week campaign's autumn pilot, what assessment has her department made on this Icelandic report and the potential impact a 4-day week could have on UK businesses and our economy?
The government has no plans to undertake any trials on the 4-day week for 5 days' pay. It is for employers and employees to reach agreements which meet their specific circumstances. But we want to get the balance right. We want to make sure we're working with employers and employees. And that's why the Employment Rights Bill will support both parties to reach agreements where they're feasible.
Secretary of State, Kevin Holland-Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if Labour members were thinking of going back to their seats this weekend for a pint in the local pub and a chat to local farmers, I think I would think again. A publican contacted me last night of a mid-sized pub saying to me that as of yesterday, because of yesterday's changes, it would be £120,000 a year worse off, moving him from profit into loss. When they said their plans were fully costed and fully funded, yesterday was a massive broken promise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, the honourable gentleman oversaw the worst Parliament for living standards in modern history, and we couldn't choose that inheritance, and we have made choices. And I would say to the honourable gentleman, would he rather we didn't compensate for the infected blood scandal? Would he rather we didn't compensate for the Horizon victims for whom there was no money in the budget on his watch? Would he rather we didn't invest in the health service? Would he rather we didn't increase the minimum wage? Would he rather we didn't support carers? Would he rather that we made choices that he made, which was to cut national insurance for workers when he had no budget to do so? This government is fixing the foundations so we can have a bright future for all of our country.
Well, their choice was to hit businesses, and that's because there's not an ounce of business experience amongst any of them. Labour's death taxes, Mr. Speaker, will hit farms and businesses. Yeah. Families with a typical farm will have to find hundreds of thousands of pounds or see their farms broken up and sold. The Environmental Secretary, their colleague, said 10 minutes ago they had no intentions of putting death taxes on businesses. That was a broken promise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to take any lectures from the opposition who said and I quote, F business. I mean, the cheek of the opposite party to come at us when we are clearing up the £22 billion black hole which we inherited, when we are setting in train stability. I spent quite a lot of yesterday, as the honourable gentleman would expect, talking to businesses, having meetings to businesses about the budget and its implications, and we talked about the potential for growth, we talked about the long-term stability and changes that we are making on this side of the House, unlike the previous government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A study published this week by the Disability Policy Centre suggests that improving support for getting disabled people, those with long-term health conditions and unpaid carers, into work and keeping them in employment could save the Treasury £38 billion. Paying a higher rate of sick pay has been shown to increase employee retention and is key to reducing economic inactivity. What assessment has the Minister made of the impact of the current rate of statutory sick pay on employee retention?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's absolutely right that we need to get more people back into work, and we need to support people to get back into work. As he will know, in the Employment Rights Bill, we are looking to increase the scope of sick pay to people below the current lower earnings limits and introduce payments from day one. We have no current plans to increase the rate of statutory sick pay, but when we get these reforms through, we will no doubt look at how we can better reform statutory sick pay, and my colleagues in the Department for Work and Pensions will be looking at that in due course.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And after the budget yesterday, if you run a small or medium-sized business, you've seen your national income tax rise, you've seen your wage bill rise. If you're in hospitality, so running a pub or a restaurant, you've seen a 35% reduction in your business rate relief. To top it off, the Employment Rights Bill is going to bring more red tape for businesses. So taken as a whole, these are massive changes happening very, very quickly. So does he agree with the Institute of Directors that this is a perfect storm of higher taxes, higher wages and higher red tape?
No. I say to the gently point out to the honourable gentleman the difficult economic inheritance that his party left to this side of the House to sort out. All the tough decisions his party refused to face up to in government, we are determined to walk towards. If he is against the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, he needs to say how he will fund the investment we announced yesterday in aerospace and automotive sectors, how he'll fund the extra investment we'll make in the NHS and other public services too.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We won't take any lectures from the party opposite about business. Plenty of us have experience of business, and I'm one of them. But look, many businesses on the high street want to continue to accept cash, Mr. Speaker. Just as importantly, many of my residents, particularly those who are elderly, disabled or vulnerable, want to continue to use cash. And I've spoken to the Citizens Advice Bureau, who have elderly residents telling them how concerned they are. What steps is the government taking to ensure that the Post Office can better offer banking services on the high street to cater for both the spenders of and the recipients of cash?
Can I just say to the honourable gentleman, it's topicals. They're meant to be short and punchy, not speeches for debate. I'm sure that we can find time for an adjournment debate for you. Minister.
Given that almost 9,500 bank branches closed on the party opposite's watch over the last 14 years, it's increasingly been left to the Post Office to provide vital banking services on the high street. Given that sub-postmaster pay has not increased for a decade, the banking industry, I'm sure, recognise their responsibility to work with us to ensure that sub-postmasters and the Post Office have what they need to help meet the critical cash and banking needs of all our constituents going forward.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Though yesterday's announcements may dampen business plans to expand, there are many businesses in my constituency and elsewhere who are finding difficulties with expansion plans because of national grid connections. What are ministers doing to engage with the Department of Energy and National Grid to ensure that connections are available?
I'm glad the member has asked what we're doing to engage with the Department for Business for Energy and Net Zero, because I sit across that department, and that is entirely the point of my role, is to make sure we're joining up our Energy Department and our Business Department so that we can crack some of these problems, and grid is number one on our list.
Ian Lavery.
Mr. Speaker,
I warmly welcome the £10 billion investment in a data centre into my constituency of Camas, but I share the views and concerns of many of the residents who believe that it's fast becoming a plug-in centre for huge infrastructure programmes. Does my honourable friend agree with me that where we've got huge infrastructure programmes in certain constituencies, that those residents should benefit in terms of local jobs and, of course, community facilities?
I agree with my honourable friend. It's essential that local communities see the benefits of these kind of landmark investments, and I'm pleased that Blackstone is investing £110 million into a fund to support local skills training and transport infrastructure, but I'm very happy to have a conversation with him about what more can be done.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Farming and agricultural businesses employ thousands of people in my constituency and make a huge contribution to the local economy. So can the Minister set out exactly how yesterday's budget will help them develop and grow?
Mr. Speaker, farmers, like any other business people, need the stability that will be delivered as a consequence of fixing the foundations that were set out yesterday. I similarly represent a constituency with a number of farmers. I'm aware of the concerns that have been raised in relation to inheritance tax, but frankly there are difficult and necessary choices that had to be made yesterday because of the choices that were not made by the government in which he served.
Becca Gittins.
Mr. Speaker, business owners in my constituency of Clwyd East in North Wales want a government which is serious about getting long-term, sustainable jobs into our economy, a process we started yesterday. With our unique geography which sees us lead in wind power and carbon capture, and our proud manufacturing base which is already benefiting from two governments working together and a long-term sustainable plan for the future, will the Minister work with me to ensure that businesses are well placed to invest in North Wales both now and in the future?
Yes, I absolutely will work with my honourable friend, and we're delighted with the £1 billion investment secured to transform the Shotton Mill site, and I think a Labour government in Westminster, a Labour government in Wales working together can deliver some great things.
Josh Bavarinder.
Mr. Speaker, 29% of jobs in the sunniest town in the UK, of Eastbourne, are connected to the hospitality sector, but many have expressed concerns about yesterday's budget to me, and UK hospitality have described it as the latest blow for hospitality. Will the Minister meet with me and local hospitality businesses to discuss these concerns? I declare an interest as a patron of the Eastbourne Hospitality Association.
Well, I'd be very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman and the Eastbourne Hospitality Association to discuss the concerns that he has articulated today. I gently say to him, as I and other ministers have pointed out in the House already, that we faced on this side of the House a very tough economic inheritance and had to make very difficult decisions in the budget yesterday. So if he and his... I'll leave it there.
Mr. Speaker, I want to see Slough High Street thrive, but stores are closing, business is struggling, and antisocial behaviour has been on the rise, especially after a lack of support and neglect for over a decade from Tory governments. So can the Minister advise what practical steps this government is taking to ensure that high streets like ours in Slough are revived?
We set out a 5-point plan in opposition to help with the revival of high streets. We're working on those plans, bringing them forward, and he will see more detail in the small business strategy command paper that we are committed to publishing this year.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have an anomalous situation in Spelthorne whereby you can get 6 red buses on an Oyster card, but you can't get the train on an Oyster card. This is crippling small businesses and people going into London. And could I ask the ministers, the combined might of the Department of Business and Trade, to lobby on my behalf to get me a meeting with the Railways Minister so that we can get Spelthorne into the zone?
I admire the honourable gentleman's ability to shoehorn in a subject which is not Department of Business and Trade, but we are, of course, very happy to help with his endeavours to talk to the Department of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The All-Party Parliamentary Group for Eye Health and Visual Impairment, which I chair, recently published its report, Changing Attitudes, Changing Lives, looking at employer attitudes towards blind and partially sighted people. We found that nearly half of them do not have accessible recruitment processes, missing out on a wealth of talent. So, can the Minister meet with me to discuss how we can create a step change to shift employer attitudes towards blind and partially sighted people?
Thank my honourable friend for her question. Of course, I'd be delighted to meet with her as part of the Great Britain Working Plan. More disabled people and those with health conditions will be supported to enter and stay in work, and I'm quite happy to discuss with her further how we can achieve that aim.
Sir Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own impact assessment suggests that the legislation of the Employment Rights Bill could cost businesses up to £4.5 billion annually and could increase the number of strikes by 54%. So does the Minister expect this legislation to enhance or undermine investor confidence?
I'll just gently point out to the honourable member that this is a 0.4% increase on businesses' total cost, which I think is a small price to pay for what the impact assessment says will actually strengthen working conditions for the lowest paid and most vulnerable in the labour market. Increased fairness and equality across Britain will have positive impacts on workers who are trapped in insecure work, face discrimination or suffer from unscrupulous employee behaviour like fire and rehire practices. If she doesn't want to support that, then I'm sure she can talk to her constituents about why.
Committee, Liam Byrne.
Thank you, sir. On Tuesday, we will hear from Sir Alan Bates and other victims of the Horizon scandal, which continues to deepen. In September, we learned there's going to be 100 more convictions quashed than we originally thought, and yesterday the bill for redress went up by £500 million. Can the Minister now tell us, have all the victims come forward, and are there any gaps left in the schemes for redress?
Well, firstly, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the decision of his select committee to take a further look at this issue. I can tell him it is a priority for this department to make sure that we are speeding up the compensation process. I have to tell the House that victims are still coming forward at this stage, and we are actively looking at whether or not all those who are coming forward are covered by the compensation schemes. We have asked the Post Office to write out to all those sub-postmasters who have not yet come forward to see if they are eligible for compensation.
Mr. Speaker, we should all welcome the work of both governments that resulted in the announcement of £63 billion of inward investment into the UK. However, since then, as a number of members have pointed out, we've had significant new regulation in the labour market and massive new taxes on business. If any of those investors now change their minds, will the Secretary of State come to the House and inform us, please?
We'll, of course, keep the House updated on the results of the investment summit, but the £63 billion, as I said earlier, is a massive show of confidence in this new government.
Very grateful, and I'm grateful for the work the Minister has put in and the Secretary of State in securing a future for the Harrow Wolf Yard at Arnish in my constituency and these in Methil, Appledore and Belfast. I understand talks are commercially sensitive, but I wonder if she can update the House and workers who are anxious about the future on how the talks are going.
I thank my honourable friend for the question and for the work that he's doing representing his community. We are working extensively with all parties to find an outcome for Harland & Wolff that delivers shipbuilding and manufacturing in Belfast, Scotland, and of course Appledore in Devon as well. I can't comment further, as he says, due to commercial sensitivities, but we are working extensively with everyone to try and get the right deal.
Chris Law.
Mr. Speaker, the ICJ judgment from the 19th of July this year ruled it's the duty of third-party states not to aid or assist Israel's unlawful occupation of Palestinian territory. So can the Minister tell us if the Department for Business and Trade has obtained legal advice, or is it in the process of obtaining advice on the legality of the UK's existing trade relations with Israel in light of this? And if so, can they share it with the House, please?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable gentleman that we work closely with our colleagues in the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, who are responsible for the international humanitarian law assessment. My good and right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has updated the House on the changed advice that was received by the Government, and I think I should leave it there.
With me to discuss how government could further develop an industrial strategy to bring up to 10,000 jobs in the offshore wind supply chain over the next 10 years.
I would be delighted to meet often and regularly with my honourable friend, as we do, to talk about these things. Of course, the offshore wind supply chain is incredibly important. We had 2 big announcements to that end, which my honourable friend mentioned in terms of Ørsted and Greenvolt, and I think there is much more we can do through the industrial strategy to keep that growing.
James Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What discussions have been had with Invest NI in relation to supporting small businesses in Northern Ireland in terms of digital evolution to help them adapt and make improvements with digital technology to ensure the smooth running of their businesses? Thanks very much.
We've held discussions with a range of organisations on exactly that issue. I promised earlier I would meet him. If he wants to add that to the list of subjects that we talk about, I'd be happy to do so.
You do like Mr Shannon. Sally Jameson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Doncaster, we have an innovative Chamber of Commerce and a fantastic set of local businesses, and as well as the much-needed upgrade to workers' rights. Would the Minister be able to update the House on what we're doing to kickstart a skills revolution for businesses in Doncaster and across the country? And would he be able to update the House on what he's doing to work across department to make sure that that happens?
Well, as others across Whitehall have already set out, we've established Skills England, and we've begun the process of reforming the apprenticeship levy to help businesses get better access to the skills they need.
Very good. Final.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With over 30 years of business experience, I'm wondering whether the party opposite's claims that there's no business experience on this side carries about as much weight as their industrial strategy did. Can I ask the Minister to confirm that prior to the election there were extensive consultations with business experts, something which I bet the party opposite wish they'd done for the last 14 years?
Yes, and can I reassure my honourable friend that on this front bunch there are members who do have private sector experience and who have run businesses, myself being one of them. And of course, we have had very strong relationships with business. We have very strong relationships with business both in the run-up to the election and now, and we will continue to build on those strong relationships to the benefit of all the people across our country.
Right, that completes questions.